I'm Terri Muuss. I'm a poet of Long Island. I live in Bay Shore with my husband, Matt Pasca. I really came to poetry through theater. I was a theater major. I loved theater. I was a professional actor in the city for years. And I started realizing there wasn't a lot of roles for women. So I wrote a one-woman show called Anatomy of a Doll that I performed in the city for years, and it was an autobiographical piece about my journey through recovery from childhood sexual abuse. And that led me to a poetry mentor, teacher, Veronica Golos. She won the New Mexico Book Award, and she's an amazing person, and I started taking poetry classes with her, and that's where I learned to love poetry. When I met my husband, Matt Pasca, he lived on Long Island. I lived in the city. And when I met him, I said, I'm never moving to Long Island. And well, here I am. There's a really vast artistic community here. And the people that I connected with first were the poetry community of Long Island. So many amazing, inspirational, creative beings live on Long Island. And there are poetry events almost every day of the week. My husband and I decided that we wanted to start one. So about 5 years ago, we started one in Bay Shore called Second Saturdays at Cyrus. And it really took off. It was kind of incredible. We had about 60 people there almost every week at Cyrus Chai and Coffee in Bay Shore, and listening to poetry and building a community there. It's been really an incredible experience. I started my writing journey as a theater person who wrote a one-person show, and I really have always wanted to get some of those pieces, those one-woman monologue pieces, into a book. So my first book is Overexposed, where I have some monologues, some like prose pieces interspersed with poetry. And then I really fell in love with the poetry community here on Long Island, and as a feminist and as somebody who loves women's writing and that women tell a unique story, Mary Jane Tenerelli and I, she's also a Long Island poet, we co-edited this book, Grabbing the Apple, which is an anthology of New York women poets. And there's some really amazing poets in here that you should really check out if you want to know the Long Island poetry scene. My second book of poetry is God's Spine, which is kind of a spiritual chiropractic about how to recover after trauma. So I'm going to read two pieces in this book. The first piece is called I'm the Type to Talk with My Hands, and it's kind of a prose poem where there's overlapping themes going through the poem, so I think you'll get them as I go. I am the type to talk with my hands. In 1975, my father sits on a fraying brown couch, counting out dimes on the table in front of him. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night and I wonder whose house I'm in. From across the street, a black girl with a red bandana says to my only friend, "Why are you playing with that white girl?" In 1976, stacks of magazines collect on our porch. My mother promises they will be worth something someday. In 1979, a neighbor tells me all ladies have fine, delicate collarbones and wrists. I have a crush on the Jamaican boy across the street, and my father slaps me, says, "It was a mistake moving into this black neighborhood." Often at school, I can see myself from above, and my body feels like a country I am visiting. In 1981, I cut my inner thigh with a razor, and the blood streams out like a billowing red bandana. Hundreds of pieces of cut magazines litter the floor of my bedroom as I collage the walls with pictures of models' collarbones and ribs. After I get my first period, my mother buys me sanitary napkins. Tampons, she says, are for people who've already had sex. In 1978, I do as I'm told, and I save all my coins in a bank for college. Blood rushes down my leg in math class, and a boy points at me like I'm a disease. In college, I learned that race is a social construction, and those words replay over an image of my father shouting the N-word at our neighbors. After my father enters my room at night to touch the insides of my thigh, he leaves a shiny dime to remind me he was there. When I look at my mother, her face is a rear-view mirror, and I can only see what is behind me. I am the only person in my family to go to college. I am 10 when my father tells me men want a whore in bed and a lady all the other times. I'm holding my first boyfriend's hand. Two boys throw a bottle at us and yell, "Jungle fever." He immediately lets go, says, "No white girl's gonna get me killed." I eat less and less food in order to feel more and more of my bones. When I am 11, my aunt gives me a lacy teddy and says, "You may as well dress like a whore if you're going to act like one." In 1979, the only safe place left is a small card table across the street, eating Jamaican food with Mr. and Mrs. Christie. My house is filled with useless items my mother is desperate to find uses for. A girl in school says, "You can't trust someone who talks with their hands." The next poem I want to read from God's Spine is a love poem. And it's an unlikely love poem because when you're as in love with your husband or your partner as I am with mine, you think about what it would be like if they weren't here, if like they died. And that is the scariest thought. So I tried to confront that through a love poem. So here's a poem called "I Admit That While You're Gone." From the house or sleeping, I picture you dead, pulled clean from the seam of our linen lives of moons and tulips into the tender groves of a distant greedy night. Each time you disappear into the most unreachable stillness I can imagine. My heart, a bug-eyed chimney of belching smoke, lurches along the violent seas of 5 o'clock rush hour. Without you, souls wail. A tempest of arms strangles necks inside the yellow geography of shifting metric. Love, your voice, so urgent, seizes me. The melody of your strange fingers. The clock strikes 11. My spine twitches. A finch released from a branch of snow. Your head in my hands. The sleeping of the waiting world. There can be nothing but this. I really believe in art's ability to make connections, to foster empathy. As somebody who's a social worker as well as a writer, I think we need the arts more than ever. There's such a giant chasm in our world right now. There's so much that people are not willing to listen to or hear or understand about people who have experiences that are different than their own. And I believe fundamentally that art has the ability to bridge that gap, to make people understand things that they would normally not understand, to help them have empathy for people that they may never have empathy for. So even if you're not a writer or an artist, I invite you to either listen to art or try to create some kind of art. Making banana bread can be art, but art makes us, I believe, closer to each other and closer to the world we occupy. So I think it's really important.